Hello and welcome back to Seagull Central. My name is Adam McDonald and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Now this is the fastest growing Brighton and Hove Albion YouTube channel out there. Thank you very much for coming to this video if you are new, and if you've been here before, thank you very much for returning. As I always say, if you do find yourself coming back to the channel, if you've not already done it, please hit that subscribe button, turn your notifications on. It really means a lot. It helps me to continue doing these videos as regular as we are doing them. And today we're making a video to really talk about an important milestone. Fabian Hurzeler reaches 50 games as Brighton manager. In a season and a bit, obviously you think about the amount of games we played last season, getting to a decent stage in the FA Cup, you play your cup competitions as well. 50 competitive games as the Brighton manager. And I thought it would be a good opportunity for Brighton and us, for all and Brighton as well, I guess, for us to take stock and think about his tenure, the style, the criticism, the positives, the fan opinion, your opinion, and just a general analysis on how we as fans kind of feel about those 50 games. And maybe, where there's room for improvement, how it compares to previous managers. So I thought, look, let's get straight into it. I think for me, how would I assess Fabian Hurzeler's first 50 games as Brighton manager? Well, first of all, I think you've got to say it's a success in itself that he's got to 50 games. The fact he's got to 50 games shows that he's not been a total disaster. He's a good manager and he's done a good job. I think that's got to be the kind of fair assessment, purely just based on the fact he's got to 50 games. You can't really do a bad job if you've done, you're not doing a bad job if you've got to 50 games. He's been kept in the Premier League. He's been kept by Brighton. He's doing pretty well. With that said, though, I think at 50 games, there are still... I'm going to go through the main points. The first one for me really is the playing style. I think it's interesting, really, that you get to 50 games, and I think if you ask most Brighton fans, what do you think of Fabian Hurzeler? I think most Brighton fans would just go like, yeah, he's all right. I don't mind. Like, he's okay. I don't think you... Obviously, you'll always find extremes within a fan base, but I think the majority of Brighton fans' feelings, and I'd love to know if you agree or disagree with this, is like, quite like the bloke, think he's all right. But yeah, and I think it is difficult, the fact that he has succeeded, particularly, Roberto De Zerbi. I was going to say Graham Potter as well. And I think obviously the job that Graham Potter did, maybe if he'd come after Graham Potter, maybe Brighton fans would feel a little bit different. It would feel like maybe a continuity candidate. I think the fact he came after De Zerbi does feel like a real stark change in maybe why lots of fans maybe haven't clung to Hurzeler in the way that they did to De Zerbi. I'll get back to that point in a little bit. Let's talk about the playing style. I think if you also ask Brighton fans kind of what is Hurzeler's key playing style, well, we all thought when he came to Brighton that it was this 3-4-3, the high line, the playing, without much of a midfield. You saw it at St. Pauli, and it seems as though he's just literally not given that system a go at all. We've not seen that at all in his time at Brighton. Sticking to a kind of 4-2-3-1, a continuation of what we saw under De Zerbi, we've not really seen a clear identity under Hurzeler. In the first few games, in his first 5, 6, 7, 8 games, we saw a lot of that, the high line. You remember Chelsea away and that game where we conceded 4 within however long, just from that absolutely insane high line. Which he ultimately abandoned, which I just find really interesting. You look at the team now, what is the style? Well, it's not really a high line so much anymore. It's not this kind of 3-4-3 system, which, Amorim's getting his criticism for that, but if Hurzeler had come over with that, we'd have all gone, look, at least we're playing away. And I think it's that thing that you can't really cling to something. When Potter came in, he was changing the identity from resolute, pragmatic football to actually attractive ball-playing football. When De Zerbi came in, it was like turning the distortion up on all of that, and it went crazy, and it was electric. This feels like, it could be really boring football. It could be pragmatic football. I don't think fans would necessarily mind as long as we kind of knew what it was. And I feel like the issue is that lots of us don't really know what it is. I think one of the conclusions I've drawn in recent weeks and recent months is it just a kind of system where you launch it into wide areas, you pump it down the channel and hope your wingers in Mitoma and Minte who are absolutely brilliant, can create moments of magic. I think that is a part of it. That does seem like a part of it. It feels like he speaks a lot about intensity, Fabian Hurzeler, and playing with real zip and intensity, and speed and running, all of those kind of things. And those have been backed up in the stats. We saw with Brighton, one of the teams that ran the most last season in the Premier League, and I'm sure the stats will back that up this season so far as well. But that's not really a style of play either. And, it's clearly why he loves players like Yasin Ayari, who has been brilliant recently. But it's not really a style of play. Pumping into the wingers and running around a lot. It doesn't really feel, you don't often feel like you see really clear patterns of play. Maybe another one would be, you kind of don't, the real emphasis on starters versus finishers and using your substitutions, Spence. You're not massively bothered if you have to soak up a bit of pressure and not play really well in the first half. We'll make the changes in the second half and we'll change the game and take games to oppositions. We've obviously seen that in recent weeks against teams like Man City, where he's done that. He obviously tried to do that at Bournemouth as well, again, where he brought on Seamas, Baleba, and someone else. I can't even remember who else he brought on at that point. So I don't know. I think, you compare that to De Zerbi and the way that there was a really clear system. I think it is interesting. So I think from a system point of view, I think you've got to say, I don't really know what we are playing. And I think that is to his detriment. I think as well, if we talk about the mixed results, I think this is another thing that needs to play into the Hürzeler assessment. We have still struggled, and I don't think you can necessarily say this is a Hürzeler issue, but we have struggled against teams you'd kind of conventionally expect to beat. You think about Wolves away last season, you think about Wolves at home, Southampton, Crystal Palace. I think maybe Everton, who obviously we saw it recently against Everton, but I think we saw it against Everton at the Amex last season. Games where Brighton would expect to beat teams, or even just games where Brighton dominate possession. We haven't really been able to produce those results. Where on the flip side, we're able to beat Liverpool, beat them at the Amex. We're able to beat Chelsea twice in the space of a week. We're able to beat Man City, do the double against Man United home and away, get big results. Tottenham as well, do big results against the big teams where we're not expected to do it. And, that is amazing. It's something I feel like I've gotten used to a lot in the last 5 seasons, 6, 7 seasons as a Brighton fan, is that thing of beating the big teams. And, that is an amazing feat in itself, to be a Brighton fan. And maybe, would you rather your points come against the big teams or the smaller teams? I don't know. As a fan, maybe you would take the big teams. It's just a bit more of a laugh and a bit more fun along the way. But I think it's that streaky element. Brighton are very streaky, and it feels like, we don't always, it feels like we'll put runs together of being really good, then being really bad. Actually, our points total last season it was actually very impressive. Only 1 point off the De Zerbi season. We achieved our longest winning streak in the Premier League. I think it was 6 games after that Nottingham Forest defeat. But then obviously we saw that heaviest league defeat in something like 60, 70 years with the 7-0 Nottingham Forest defeat. So I think for me, it just does feel like a team with a lot of inconsistencies. And I don't know, I feel like, maybe it's I don't know, there's many reasons you can put down to that. And I think obviously that does lie with the manager. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's a stick you can massively beat him with. It's not a crazy issue. It's nothing new for Brighton, is it? You can't say he deserves to be sacked because of that. I think for Brighton, who want to finish between kind of 5th and 10th, or maybe the club would say they now want to finish kind of between 5th, 6th, 7th, achieve Europe again, being a bit streaky, being a bit inconsistent, but ultimately finishing up around mid-table, that's kind of a good result for Brighton, isn't it? So I think you've got to maybe set it in that context. I think just generally under the Hürzeler reign, we've got to talk a little bit about recruitment and the way that the recruitment's been used. Obviously spending 250 million pounds last season, put something like 60, 70 million, 80 million this season. But we still find ourselves in a situation where we are short in key areas. You think about up front, we've spent 200 million, 70 million, and we're still relying on 34, 35-year-old Danny Welbeck and 2 Greek lads. You think about Matoma and Minte being the only senior wingers available. One of the main things for me that I find interesting as well is Hürzeler's kind of aversion to, how would you describe it? I don't want to say maverick players, but those players with a cutting edge. In Ciso, Buonanotte, even Ferguson to an extent as well, as Stepinian. I don't think Estupinian was certainly a case where Hurzeler wanted to let him go. But I think in terms of Enciso, Buonanotte, Ferguson, it feels like these players who are difference makers, who can light the touch paper and do something. It feels like he's maybe gotten a bit of an aversion to that. You think about Gruder as well and his reluctance to play him from the start. It feels a little bit frustrating in that sense that, I don't know, sometimes it just feels like we're crying. Like the fact he was playing Matt O'Reilly over Gruder just feels like, oh. And even now we're not really seeing Gruder after seeing the best of him in recent weeks. It feels very, very annoying. I don't know. So yeah, and I think also for me it's a thing about his personality. I think, and I can put this thing to a side really, but it's like comparing that personality to managers of the past. I find it hard to warm to him. Despite him having done a good job, got us an 8th place finish, which in any other season would have been a European finish, and obviously, this season not starting brilliantly, but even doing quite well, I don't feel a massive connection to him, massive affinity to him. Often the away end he won't come over. You do hear a lot of the fans kind of talking about that as well, and I don't know. I think that's maybe a minor point, but I think it does speak to something, that kind of connection to a fan base. I don't know. It feels like maybe at home he's a lot more connected, but away from home it feels a lot different. So I don't know. I think I'm finding it hard to come to a pithy conclusion on Hurzeler, because ultimately I think I'm happy with how things are. I do think that we've spent a lot of money, and I think you compare it to Potter, De Zerbi. You can maybe say, look, if Hurzeler had come in after Potter, it might have been a lot easier because he might have been quite similar to Potter. The fact we've been given De Zerbi and kind of it's all made us realize, oh my God, this is how it could be. Someone who will actually challenge the board and someone who will change the way we play and turn the temperature up is exciting for fans. And maybe this kind of just a club man who will use the players he's been given and will do the best to achieve the goals of the football club without really trying to raise expectations in an overt way. It's not a bad thing, is it? And maybe slowly but surely that is what's going to work for Brighton. But right now, I think it's kind of sad that you have a manager where it doesn't feel very inspired, does it? It doesn't feel like in a very, very inspiring moment. And I think maybe he should be getting more out of this side, a very, very talented side. And I've said it for a while, but maybe, the big wins that we do get rely more on individual moments of quality and getting it to our wingers who do brilliant things, as opposed to seeing clear patterns of play. I don't want to be too harsh, because also you understand that it could be a lot worse. And as Brighton fans, we obviously know that in recent years and decades. So, look, I like the bloke. I think he's done a good job. I want to just see a bit more. I want him to try the 3-4-3. I want him to give the Maverick players a bit more of a go. But other than that, I don't think we can complain too much. Let me know in the comments what you think. Do you think I've been harsh? Do you think I've been fair? Do you think I've been too positive? Let me know what you think about Fabian Hurzeler. How would you assess his first 50 games? Look, the fact he's got there in itself is a success, I guess. So that's got to be said for itself. Let me know, what do you think of Hurzeler's first 50 games and how does it compare to the past? And what do you think things will look like in 50 Premier League games, 50 competitive games time for Brighton? Will he still be there? Will we have a different manager? And how much better or worse will things look for Fabian Hurzeler in 50 games time? Let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. As always, if you've got this far in the video and you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button, turn your notifications on and get in the comments. Let me know what you think. Get the like in as well. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next video, which will be very, very soon. And as always, up the Albion.